Welcome to TalkNorth.com. Thanks for listening. 2 quick promos. BiteSquad.com all this week. 10% off if you use the promo code HOCKEY. Bite Squad app, BiteSquad.com, promo code HOCKEY. Also, SodaStick.com. Use the promo code YouBetcha to get free shipping on any size order. Great local sports-themed apparel. BiteSquad.com, SodaStick.com. Thanks very much. This is Roy Smalley's Chin Music, part of TalkNorth.com. This is our baseball show on the network. And today's another special edition where I sit down with Derek Falvey, basically the chief baseball executive for the Minnesota Twins. We're in spring training. We are up in the press box area right for a Sunday afternoon game, and we're going to hit on a bunch of different topics. I appreciate Derek taking the time. And because I want to just let the interview run, I'll thank my sponsors up front, berrycoffee.com. Tony Hoaglund, your State Farm agent champion. I've told you plenty about Berry Coffee over the years. Great local company that started small and has become a juggernaut, but they still have a great personal touch. They can benefit you if you're a restaurant, bar, business, or just a homeowner. Somebody just wants really good coffee at home. I know I'm going to be purchasing some of their equipment, and I'm going to get Steve Brem's recommendation when I move into my house in May. They're great people. Roy and Steve have been friends for a long time. Roy really values Steve, his green efforts, his customer service, his philanthropic side. It's a great company. And, if you've been to a restaurant or a bar in the last week, the odds are they have Berry Coffee services set up there. They also handle all kinds of snacks and filtration systems, other beverages for your business or your home or your restaurant, your bar, whatever. Berrycoffee.com. Check it out. You will understand just how thorough they can service your beverage needs. Berrycoffee.com. And thanks also to Tony Hoaglund, your State Farm agent champion.
Hey, Minnesota sports fans. This is your local State Farm agent, Tony Hoaglund. I need you all to ask yourselves this question. If you're in an at-fault car accident and you are sued for $700,000, how much of that $700,000 will my current insurance company pay? If you are unsure or can't answer all $700,000, you need to give us a call. State Farm has been number one in car insurance since World War II and number one in homeowners insurance since 1964. For a no-obligation review of your current policies, call us at 763-421-4900 or check out our website at www.championinsurance.com.
Thanks to Derek Falvey for taking some time with me today at spring training. A lot to buzz through. It's a pretty interesting camp, and I would like to start with the conversation I had with Byron Buxton this morning. I've known him since he was drafted. I've spent a lot of time with him in Georgia. I've gotten to know him, and he's always been just this kind, small-town, deferential guy, and now he sounds as determined as I've ever seen him. What's your take on what you're seeing from him?
I think you're right about all those things. That's who he is. I don't think at his core he'll ever change from that, but I also think he's maturing as a competitor. That's probably the best way I would describe it. I think he knows about what it takes and thinking about the right things around going at bat and approaching the season with a certain kind of mindset around I'm going to attack the season. That's his approach right now. I think that's a good thing for all of us.
The only real negative I've heard about Byron, other than injuries, has been if you talk to certain hitting experts, and I do a podcast with one hitting expert, they say sometimes his bat drags a little bit at the beginning of the swing. Do you see that? Is that a concern? Is it something you can fix it if it is a concern?
Yeah, it's a good question. The thing about Byron that we always want to be sensitive to, because I think if you look at his history, he's gone through a lot of swing changes. He's made some adjustments. I know a lot made of leg kick versus no leg kick and otherwise. I think sometimes you can really overcoach the mechanical side of a hitter. I think what Byron is an athlete in the box, and I don't know that it's ever going to be the cleanest swing. It's not going to look like Joe Mauer's swing, right? Like that, as for one point of reference. I don't think it is. But I don't think we need to change that. I think we need to tap into what he does well, which is he can get to a ball. He has power. He knows those balls he can get to, but he can also drive a ball the other way and just let his legs take over too. So I just think we need to let him be the athlete he is in the box. Are there mechanical flaws here and there? Sure. But there probably are for most hitters. And I just think we need to let him be who Byron is, and we'll see the best of him.
It is interesting, too. Dave Winfield, covered him at the end of his Hall of Fame career. He had the biggest hitch I've ever seen, and it did not prevent him from getting to any pitch he wanted to hit.
No question. You see guys, you look across baseball now and you see some guys with interesting swings. I think of Hunter Pence, somebody who had a very long, illustrious career. He was an exceptional player, exceptional competitor. He's still playing now. I know he's on a non-roster out there in Texas this spring. But, the guys have different swing types. And I think there are mechanical truths, so to speak, things that you want to do mechanically, good base, get in your legs, use your body core a certain way. I think those are true of every hitter. But everyone approaches it a little bit differently, and I think you want to be careful not to overcoach the athlete out of a swing.
It's my role. Sometimes I second guess you. That's the way this works. I'm going to let you second guess me. I wrote a column, a month ago saying, hey, why don't the Twins take a shot at someone like Bryce Harper? Is that crazy, unrealistic? I'll let you tell me whether I should have written that.
Well, hey, fair question on all of these, right? I mean, free agency and how you build a team is a unique art and science blend, and you've got to figure out how you work within your parameters in terms of every team has payroll constraints. That's just reality, whether you're small market, mid market, large market. So you've got to figure out how you allocate different spots to your roster, and I think Bryce is obviously a tremendous player, as are a number of free agents that signed in the recent weeks here for significant amounts of money. And I think that we certainly have carried players with significant salaries, notably Joe Mauer on our roster. But I think right now, for where our team was and for where we looked at kind of the upside and opportunities and the continued build toward the future, we felt that those were conversations that were maybe better left for somewhere down the road. So I definitely don't begrudge anybody thinking about the impact of some of these high-end players. But the key isn't just the high-end player that you add to the team. The key is how you fill out all the 25 and then really more like 35 spots that are going to fill around it over the course of a season.
Mentioning Mauer, by the way, it's been a constant theme by part of the fan base that when the Twins were struggling, they blamed Mauer's salary. It never made sense to me. I always felt like, let's say Mauer was making $10 million instead of 23, whatever. I mean, that extra $13 million doesn't take you from 70 wins to 95 wins, But,
sure.
But again, I'll defer to you. Was Mauer's contract holding you guys back at all?
Well, I think, and once a guy starts to make a certain amount of money, I think there is always he becomes the lightning rod,
yep.
Right? And I don't think that's unique to Joe. Unfortunately for Joe, I'm sure he felt that at times. But it's in every market and certainly every team. So I don't think that's unique. I do think, though, that when you think about as a percentage of your payroll, what can be allocated to, say, 1 to 2 players of your top players, it does get a little bit more tricky if that number is significant, if you get to a certain percentage as to how you do fill out each of the pieces. I agree with you, Jim, that it's not a difference between 70 and 93 wins necessarily, but I do think it does change the way you have to think about the remaining pieces on your roster, and it does constrain you a little bit. So to the extent we can be a little bit more spread among our group and a little bit more diversified, so to speak, in our investments on our roster, we feel that may give us a better chance for our model to be successful.
I know you're probably not going to give me a number, but do you know or feel that you have a spending limit, a payroll limit?
I feel like I've looked, the last few years at revenues and expenses across baseball, right? You get a sense for where teams probably are. And some of these things are out of your control, right? TV deals in certain markets are different than they are in other markets. Certain revenues are associated with that. So I think that's just part of it. I really try not to focus too much on that. What I do have conversations with Jim Polat about and Dave St. Peter and our group are around where we think we are and what incremental spend will allow us to do in terms of investment of this club and when we should be pushing that forward. I think you saw, 12 months ago when we were sitting in spring training, adding to it and eventually getting to a record high payroll for our club, we felt that incremental spend made a lot of sense, especially coming off of the prior year where we thought our team was and what that looked like. I think this year we've been pretty aggressive again, not quite to that same level we were last year, but it's still the beginning of the year. There's still a lot of time left over the course of the season by way of trade, by way of opportunity. If you're in a good position in July, you want to have some payroll flexibility. So I would say that I don't have a specific number, and that's not the way Jim has operated. I've been consistent in saying that if I have a good baseball deal to bring that I think is a good investment, Jim has been incredibly supportive of that. I fully anticipate that going forward.
The trend among baseball general managers these days is not to overspend or commit a number of years to players once they get to a certain age, whether it's 30, 33, whatever, depending on the position. The Oakland Raiders just traded for Antonio Brown, a 31-year-old number one receiver in a league where there are hardly any 31-year-old lead receivers. Did you have a thought about, either the general trend or that deal in particular?
I think about, I really do look at other sports and how they build their clubs and otherwise, and I realize we're all dealing with totally different constraints around payroll limits and salary caps and things like that in the other sports. So I can't profess to say I know exactly what those clubs or those organizations are thinking when they make those trades. But I do think the work that's being done now in baseball, specific to what you're talking about in aging trends, just relates back to how best we understand the right parts of the curve to get the perfect, the best performance. And for a long time, free agency was a lot about paying for the past and what had transpired up to that point. I think we're getting better as an industry trying to figure out what we think is going to happen moving forward. It's not always going to be perfect, but these are educated guesses relative to everything we know, and we're getting better at understanding that, and that may impact the industry trends across the board in terms of years of investment and how long you want to go. I think in any time you're investing the further out, the less clear it is at the end of that contract. So I just think we're being a little bit more sensitive as an industry to thinking about how far out you want to go in those contracts.
Speaking of free agents, it's very common that free agents disappoint, especially big money. I will say that my first look at Martin Perez, he lit it up. That's very impressive. And so if he ends up being the pitcher that I saw, I think, is Thad going to get most of the credit there?
Well, I'm going to give that to Wes Johnson and our pitching crew. To me, when we look at Martin, and I'm sure there's already been some of this written, and I'm sure it will be if he continues to perform the way he has, some real changes to what he's done. So Thad, to his credit, give Thad his credit. He knew the kid, and he knew the makeup, and he knew the work ethic, and he knew him going back to when they signed him in Texas. And he said, this kid's a worker. There's no question about that. And as we got to know him, and we had a phone call with him, and Wes Johnson and Jeremy Hefner and others talked to him, and this is going back to December, when we had some ideas for a plan as to how we might help him moving forward, we needed to know he was open-minded to that. You can't just if we had at that time felt he said he was good to go and just ready to roll in, we might have had a very different conversation about his acquisition. Instead, he said, hey, I'm interested, I'm invested, I want to learn. And so Wes got a chance to spend time with him in the offseason. Jeremy spent time before they came into camp. They started planning for what this looked like. So none of this was just haphazard. It was very planned and purposeful through the winter. And what he's done since he's been here in camp has been that and then some, more than we could have dreamed. So I think the key is now continue to make steady progress. He's going to have good days. He's going to have bad days. But making a change is not easy for a pitcher. But at 27 years old, 2-3 years removed from being a really good middle-of-the-rotation starter, we felt there was a little more upside to tap into there. And I think, to get to your first point about free agents there, free agency, in my mind, should be a place where we seek opportunity to potentially help and improve the performance of a player. Remember, a year ago, we signed Anibal Sanchez into camp, hoping that we could kind of find some ways to adjust some things for him. And it didn't work out here for us. I'm really happy for him. It went and worked out for him in Atlanta. But there are times where a guy coming in, it might not be the most obvious choice because of what has transpired historically. But if you can see some things developmentally that will help you moving forward, that should be what we invest in.
Is there a missing piece to the Miguel Sano story? That, he gets hurt in the winter, he comes here, sounds like it'll be 10 days in the boot, and suddenly it's worse. Did someone, I'll ask the blunt question, did somebody drop the ball? Was there something that wasn't taken care of in the Dominican? How does this happen?
Fair question. And, this is one of those difficult realities of, as you're getting close to spring training, if something happens and, you're kind of expecting, I'll just go to camp and we'll figure it out when we're there. He dealt with that cut on his foot really right before he came to camp and got it sutured down in the Dominican Republic and seemed to have it in a good place, and we wanted to get him up here as quickly as possible, then travel delays, and otherwise he finally gets up here as we kick off camp, and we quickly realized there's maybe some things we need to deal with here that are a little bit more than just the cut, slight infection, things like that. You want to get him started on antibiotics and do the types of things that anyone would do if you had that issue. So that slowed us down a little more than we expected. We hoped that it would continue to heal once we started addressing that right from the get-go. He had been sutured up. Everything was in a seemingly pretty good place. But unfortunately, we kind of stagnated and plateaued in his recovery with that, and maybe related in particular to that infection. So our thought on that at that point was, if you let it continue, it will heal. At some point it will heal. The question is, should we take a more active step to take a step backward to make sure we're taking good steps forward over the next couple of weeks? That's what we did. We sent him up to the Mayo Clinic, got a chance to look at it. They cleaned it out. Everything's in a great place. He'll be back here tomorrow. So we have a much cleaner plan as to what's going to happen moving forward now.
Obviously, he's very important to the franchise, and by all accounts, he had a great winter. Does this lessen your expectation for him?
It's